How does our brain work and what goes wrong in major depression? This is a podcast written by Dr. Herregotz, neuropsychiatrist and founder of emotional therapy or brain management. It is part of the series Psychiatry for Dummies from the Dutch language podcast series The Mouse and the Elephant. Today we're talking about major depression, which we like to distinguish from dysthymia, commonly referred to as burnout. Scientists don't like using this latter guilt-laden term because it's so vaguely descriptive and too easily implies that you're burned out due to your environment. As always, we prefer to place the cause in the functioning of the brain and ineffective neuroscience in the emotional systems that can become dysregulated. Something is seriously wrong in our brains when 1 in 5 people in Belgium is currently taking an antidepressant, or 7 in 10 have already taken one. Recently, a well-known Belgian child psychiatrist noted that 1 in 2 children struggle with thoughts of suicide, and the results of the Nemesis study in the Netherlands were disastrous. I understand that if you approach this phenomenon from the philosophical or thinking side of your brain, you quickly search for causes outside yourself. But in ET or emotional therapy, we turn this around. What fears in your brain allow your environment to disrupt its functioning, and how can you remove these from between your ears? I call this survival of the wittiest. No matter what storm rages beside you or has raged, how do you survive it calmly, powerfully, and successfully? In depression, most of our creative survival techniques are switched off. And that's why I'm trying to explain now how your environment or past can affect your beautiful brain if you don't know how to locate or remove the destructive fears in your head. As mentioned in the podcast, from worrying to panic, we all unconsciously pile up more and more fear cycles in our brains and suppress or fail to feel the warning signs of depression when they arise. Every major depression or severe form of brain fatigue is preceded by years of periods of mental rumination or building doomsday scenarios, rehashing plans and actions in a futile attempt to prevent the imagined doom. In medical terms, we call these obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors, and they circle like vultures around our fears with a capital F. For centuries, they've caused unnecessary misery, drama, and sorrow, filling the books of philosophers and gurus. No prayer or pilgrimage has ever stopped the destruction of the wars we start. The 13th and previous Dalai Lama repeatedly suggested to the politicians in Tibet at the time to build up their defense before China liberated them with their ruthless army. Through the prayers of the current 14th Dalai Lama, he admits in his latest book, Voice of the Unheard, that better defense or deterrence through a modern army would not have left his people strangled in their current miserable position for 70 years. I'm done with philosophers and religious leaders. They've had over 2,000 years to lead us out of the desert, and in our minds, the storm of life has never caused so much unrest, anger, and panic. Psychiatrists now have a chance not to repeat the same mistakes, and I see many colleagues heading down the path of old philosophers and gurus, shifting blame to politicians, social media, diet, exercise, and so on. I'm done with these new Jesuses, and as a researcher and physician, I believe we can do little to nothing with them. The stove is burning and the little drops of water won't cool it down. Now, to the point, and listen carefully because it's your brain, and whatever goes wrong in it is your responsibility. Depression doesn't always come with suicidal tendencies or a sense of being tired of life, but it significantly increases the likelihood. To focus on what really goes wrong, brain fatigue sounds more logical to me. What is caused by the prolonged presence of destructive fears, obsessive thoughts, and compulsive behaviors, I've further divided into 3 distinct domains. Each covers an age-old mechanism in the animal or emotional side of our brain that ensured the survival of all animals through the centuries. The first is sleep, which is also touched upon in another podcast. As communities, both for animals and humans, became increasingly complex, the REM phases had to increasingly reorganize the other two domains, stress tolerance and the cocaine system. For many, it seems no longer able to keep up with its cleaning duties, leading to problems falling asleep, staying asleep, morning inhibition, and daily fluctuations, each with consequences for their accompanying hormones. It's no coincidence that disturbed sleep and its consequences feature prominently in depression questionnaires. Reorganization happens through the seeking system, which desperately needs sleep. It's discussed in more detail for experts or serious enthusiasts in the ebook Physics of Fear and the podcast The Third Eye. In your dreams, it's as if better defense or attack systems are constantly being sought. Sleep is like search, reliving situations in adventures with its six friends in the background. Just like in dreams or family constellations, it searches for better ways to handle a situation in the future and increase survival chances. The second player in depression I call for simplicity the defense system or stress tolerance, because modern defense no longer takes place on the battlefield of wars or physical fights, but on the battleground of social, educational, and relational wars. It also determines one of the two measuring tools for falling out of the work circuit and whether you're ready to step back in. If something goes wrong at this leg of your tripod, you experience stress or create stress. Whether it's physical or mental doesn't matter, and it usually depends on your genetic makeup. The third system in your brain that ensured our survival is the attack system or cocaine system. It's more evocative for people and immediately makes clear what it's about. Someone under the influence of cocaine is so full of excessive confidence, strength, focus, and concentration that fighting goes better and leads to superhuman performance. It was given to all stormtrooper soldiers during Hitler's Blitzkrieg, and amphetamines under various new chemical cousins are still given to top athletes, probably soldiers and also our children, Ritalin, Concerta, etc. The war on drugs is far from over and won't be won by curbing administration. This system looks pretty bad for all of us, and we all demand instant, quick and efficient solutions to achieve our crazy human goals. As mentioned, the failure of the anger system or attack system also determines whether you can no longer handle work at school or professionally, and whether you'll be able to in the long term. There's a myth or meme in many people's minds that if your stress tolerance and cocaine system, or fear and anger, have ever failed, they can never regain their former level. I want to firmly contradict this and even go so far as to say that the best performance level you can still remember can not only be restored but even improved. Your emotional system is already full of viruses from birth, and from the second third of pregnancy, the fear system is already open to dysregulation. From then on, it can only evolve into a delayed or disrupted mode if destructive fears, obsessive thoughts, and compulsive behaviors get the chance to pile up. And that certainly happens in our culture. Back to the neurophysiological domain of stress tolerance. Because the seeking system also works in the background during the day and is heavily engaged during the REM phases of sleep, the animal side of our brain constantly reorganizes the 6 emotional systems to deal with external attacks. Both the care, lust, and play systems can be reorganized to better handle any aggressor or stress the next day. The problem with these positive emotional systems is that, to put it meditatively, they are water systems. They are vital like water, but can suddenly disappear, melt like snow in the sun, or sink into the earth. To put it simply, when you're seriously threatened, anger, fear, and sadness take over, and the positive emotional systems are wiped off the map. We're no longer able to be loving and caring for ourselves or others, and our affection and sexual desire disappear along with our playfulness, laughter, and zest for life. The seeking system should ensure constant improvement of our defense and needs access to all 6 other emotional systems. That's why emotional therapy, meditative or bodywork, focuses primarily on the 3 negative emotional systems, as they can not only crush the 3 positive emotional systems, but also disrupt the sleep, defense, and attack systems to such an extent that evolving into depression or psychosis becomes inevitable. When stress tolerance derails or becomes disrupted, we speak of irritability. The blame-shifting side of our brain loves to misuse this form of irritability with a new empirical buzzword, high sensitivity. All too often, this is wrongly used, just like with ASD, ADHD, and ADD, to attribute that state in your brain to the environment and place the solution there too. The environment must change or adapt. I understand this and see the incompetence of people and children daily who don't know how to transform their defense system from irritability to stress tolerance. Managing fears is an art and requires special meditative work, blood, sweat, and tears, yes, but placing the blame and solution outside ourselves will only increase the degree of irritability and cost society a lot of money. By the way, high sensitivity depends on the extent to which the care systems are large in our brain, and that's something to be proud of and precious. Psychopaths have little to no care systems from birth, and this genetic line will likely not ensure our reproduction in the long term. High irritability depends on the extent to which you've accumulated destructive fears, obsessive thoughts, and compulsive behaviors. The recovery or improvement of the defense system for emotional therapy lies in finding these fears and, together with you, becoming richer in dynamic meditative techniques that suit you and help you manage them. To measure the severity of depression or brain fatigue, we use questions or questionnaires that map out disruptions in sleep, stress tolerance, and the cocaine system. Regarding irritability or your stress tolerance in the red, we can be brief. It involves any form of overstimulation or disruption of your senses, hearing, seeing, smelling, feeling, or tasting, and any form of overstimulation or disruption of physical systems. From top to bottom, this can physically include anything: headaches, neck pain, shoulder pain, swallowing pain, heart palpitations, diaphragm issues with chest pressure and/or hyperventilation and/or shortness of breath, stomach discomfort, disturbed hunger or thirst, intestinal cramps, constipation, diarrhea. In general, it can cause skin problems, sweating attacks, or generalized muscle pain or fatigue. No need to look at this separately. If your GP finds no abnormalities, you can in 90% of cases already conclude for yourself that Mr. Irritability is taking over Miss Stress Tolerance. Regarding your attack or cocaine system, multiple substances and pathways in your brain are responsible for smooth functioning, which is why I don't call it the noradrenaline or dopamine system, which might be more accurate for the substances we produce ourselves to ensure our drive, zest for life, focus, and concentration. Cocaine is more evocative and still externally influences this system like one of the best. As mentioned, a disruption of this system leads to less drive, zest for life, focus, and concentration. In our children, we call this ADHD or ADD. As far as I'm concerned, ASD, ADHD, and ADD are a combination of a disrupted defense or attack system in children. Due to the specificity of their brain and their traumatic environment, they evolve in a certain direction, driven by an overload of fears, obsessive thoughts, and compulsive behaviors. This leads to an underdevelopment of their brain, not the other way around. It's not the developmental disorder that disrupts their brain. The disrupted functioning of the attack system is also nicely mapped out in questionnaires. And when you add up the negative symptoms of disrupted sleep, irritability, and drive, you can measure the severity of your depression or brain fatigue. We partly owe this to the pharmaceutical industry, which, all criticism aside for now, has forced us to think scientifically again and substantiate mechanisms of action with placebo-controlled or randomized research. The good news is that brain fatigue can be treated reasonably too very well, but the bad news is that you'll likely end up in our hands, whether good or not, for a while. So, please do everything to prevent this and manage your fears, your sleep, your defense and attack systems. These three important pillars are your vital life companions, and the current flood of tips and tricks from the spiritual corner or martial arts will offer no help from either side. They are repetitions of the past or old wine in new bottles. We shouldn't look to the past for the solution, but combine recent scientific research with mechanisms of action that have already proven their worth. Of course, the crashing of our tripod also has consequences for the other emotional systems, which can each derail. Sadness can go in multiple directions, from too much to nothing at all. And with the positive systems, care, lust and play, we mainly see a reduction to complete absence. For example, a deeply depressed mother may suddenly be convinced that she should kill her children to spare them this world, and sometimes feels nothing during the act. So please seek good emotional therapists who can uncover the underlying fears and their mechanisms for you, and above all, teach you how to remove them from between your ears. This is the future of psychiatry and psychology, because the past of descriptive and philosophical science has yielded very little so far, and both disciplines are under pressure. The pseudoscience within ourselves and that which tries to surpass us around us should be a stimulus to leave it behind forever. Finally, I want to clarify that this is about emotional systems and not specific forms of fear, anger, or sadness and other expressions of emotions, which are already described in thousands of books. Each system produces numerous perversions or deviations, and describing them has yielded little. Healing or curing them and closing Pandora's box forever is our goal. Only then do we still have a chance at survival, and that future is open to everyone. Until the next podcast.